Day 4 of our Facebook Live chats for National Prevention Week. Today we'll be talking about the prevention of illicit drug use and youth marijuana use. There will be a question and answer at the end, so please remember to submit any questions you may have on this topic via the comments section or for privacy via inbox. Okay, with that being said, let's get started. We have Agent Blankenship from Pickens County Sheriff's Office here with us today. However, due to Agent Blankenship's being involved in undercover operations, we will not be able to show his face on camera. Okay. So how are you, Agent Blankenship?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your experience with prevention of illicit drug use and youth marijuana use in the county.
All right. Well, I'm employed by the Pickens County Sheriff's Office. I've been there since 2005. I spent a brief stint as a road deputy before getting to the narcotics unit in 2007. I've been working drugs ever since then. We're the Special Operations Unit within the Pickens County Sheriff's Office, and we work vice, narcotics, drugs, gambling, an array of subjects that aren't handled by standard investigations or your normal deputy. Prior to working at the Sheriff's Office, I attended Concord University in West Virginia, where I got a bachelor's degree in education. I held a teaching certificate for the first couple of years I lived in South Carolina to actually teach high school science, chemistry, and biology. And I've worked a multitude of investigations within the Pickens County Sheriff's Office in the drug realm, from distributions of illegal substances, the manufacture of different illicit drugs, the transportation, trafficking. We've also worked prostitution cases, gambling cases, murder for hires. Like I said, anything that's not handled in general investigations or by our road units.
You stay busy.
Slightly.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about marijuana use among youth in Pickens County?
Sure. It's funny because marijuana at this point in time is a very controversial subject, mostly because you have a strong push for the legalization. You have a number of individuals who push for legalization based off of the fact that they believe it does have medical benefits, and there are studies that do show that there are certain cannabinoids, which are oils that are inside of marijuana, that show some sort of medical benefit. But currently, marijuana is classified as a Schedule I controlled substance by the DEA, which means that it's not legally possessed. It's technically not legal for even a company to test the medical benefits of it. So therefore, its availability legally is very limited. The issue that we run into is that we have such a large number of individuals that want to piggyback off of medical use so that they can use it recreational. They'll mention some of the studies that have been done and the medical benefits that take place, but what they fail to mention is that, number one, they generally aren't suffering from any kind of debilitating disease that would require medication. And the other thing that they fail to acknowledge is that the chemicals that have shown to have positive medical benefits are not the same chemical substances that cause an individual to experience the euphoria and the high that marijuana has. So there's the argument really doesn't hold a whole lot of water for legalization for medical use. However, I would agree that there's a pretty good argument as to maybe a reclassification or rescheduling of marijuana, because if it does have its medical benefits, then there is some use for it, but that use is obviously not to the recreational use. Now you have the other side of the argument for legalization, where people want it to be legalized, and they generally compare marijuana's detriment to society to alcohol, and they tend to use the arguments of marijuana. No one has ever overdosed on marijuana, whereas individuals have overdosed on alcohol, or similar arguments as far as the what marijuana does to you as far as long-term health effects. which, once again, being a controlled one scheduled substance, there's not a whole lot of double-blind or single-blind experiments that have taken place on what the exact long-term effects are. We do know through studies on individuals who have used marijuana illegally that it has a debilitating effect on their brain, how it functions, and that comes to show in just the lifestyle that the average marijuana habitual user leads. They tend to put less emphasis on day-to-day activities, jobs, taking care of their own personal hygiene or the hygiene of others. There's also the argument with reference to taxes and the amount of money that could be taken in, but through our experience with investigations spanning out in Colorado and California, where there is a recreational amount that a person can possess, they tend to tout on the amount of tax money that's come in, but what individuals fare on the what we call the pro-pot side, what they fail to share is the cost that has come into effect from having to, one, clean up and deal with the labs that take place because people are not satisfied with standard marijuana. They want to increase the illicit drug, the tetrahydrocannabinol that's inside of marijuana that actually gets you high, because they want to increase the amount of that drug that they can deliver per volume. They now have what's called BHO labs, where they're having explosions, they're having burns, very similar to methamphetamine labs. There's a large cost there. There's a large cost when it comes to Department of Social Services, because you have a higher amount of individuals who are not taking care of their children because they are able to possess marijuana legally. They're using it on a regular basis, and they're not focusing on their day-to-day tasks, the needs of their children, the needs of themselves. So there's been an increase in kids that are in foster care. There's been an increase in accidents that are DUIs. DUI is not only alcohol use. Anytime a person operates a vehicle under their faculties to drive are affected through any chemical substance, alcohol, drugs, even prescription medication, it is a driving under the influence. So they've had an increase in accidents of individuals that were driving while they were high. Those are all things that whenever people argue for the legalization, they seem to leave out some of the detrimental effects that come to play. And when I talk to people about legalization of marijuana, I like to tell them, there's always three sides of the story. And you'll have the pro-pot side, and you'll have the anti-pot side. And both sides will generally bend the narrative so that it matches exactly what they want the public to believe. But it's up to the public to do the investigation and find out where the truths are on each side, because there's always a middle ground with that. But as far as youth use, marijuana is readily available. It's mailed to South Carolina from states that it's legal. It's also shipped here through the same transit that we get our methamphetamine through Mexico. But the majority of the high-grade marijuana that we see is usually shipped here from a state where it's legal to possess it, because they're growing it hydroponically, they're growing it indoors, and they just have the capability of having a much higher THC content, and that derives more money per gram.
So, in relation to youth in the county, I'm just going to say this the way I'm thinking it, okay?
That'd be fine.
They're not smoking the marijuana of my generation.
No, ma'am.
No, they're smoking something that's much more potent.
It's much more potent. The marijuana through the 60s, 70s, 80s was generally grown, the majority of the time was grown outdoors, where you can't control the climate, you can't control so much the atmospheric pressure, the daylight cycle. You have a small amount of control over nutrients, but because you're growing it in soil outdoors, that's not controlled. You can't make sure that all of the nutrients you supply to the plant or all the water you supply to the plant is actually being used by it. It dissipates. So the THC content on average was around 3% at that point in time. As time has progressed, people have studied the plant. They have figured out they can trick the plant into budding, which has the buds are where the high THC quantity is. They've tricked it in through light cycles. They've increased nutrients. They've done cross strains. You know, they've intermingled two different strains with high THC contents to the point where we have seen indoor grows produce locally in the area of 15% THC. The highest that I've seen so far recorded on just a plant was somewhere in the area of a 30% THC. And what that means is there is a higher amount of the illicit drug, THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, is the actual drug that the DEA has as a Schedule I controlled substance. That's the illegal drug. The thing about that is, and we go back to the argument for the medicinal benefits, is the THC, like I said, is the psychedelic drug. And generally, if you increase the amount of THC, then you decrease the other cannabinoids that are in the plant. Therefore, all of those other oils that can be extracted from that plant, when you increase your THC, that have medicinal benefit, are actually reduced.
Okay.
But no, it is not the same marijuana, and what happens is you'll see a much stronger effect on the brain, especially of a developing adolescent, because they're, you know, the male adolescent or male, you know, Homo sapien brain isn't fully developed until around the age of, I think it's 25. I'm not 100% sure. It's between 23 and 25, somewhere in there. So when you have these individuals who in their teen years start using a drug that has psychedelic effects on their brain, it's going to leave a lasting impression on a brain that's continuing to develop. That's why, you know, a lot of supplements and a lot of medications that you take have ages on them. Hey, don't use this unless you're of this certain age, because you're more likely to suffer detrimental health effects if you introduce this drug into a developing organism than if it's fully developed. But so, you know, to answer your question, though, it's not the same marijuana. It's the same drug. It's just in a much higher potency. As a matter of fact, that's another issue we run into when I talk about the BHO labs. And, you know, go back to the pro pot, folks have the argument that it's a natural plant that grows, but they fail to realize that cocaine and heroin are the same thing. They both come from a natural plant. As a matter of fact, the cocaine plant is very similar. It has cocaine hydrochloride inside of the leaves. The only difference in the cocaine that we have people using and marijuana, of course, is the marijuana is usually still in plant material. What they've done with the cocaine is they've crushed the leaves up, they've solvated it, and they've actually extracted the cocaine hydrochloride from the plant, dried it, and now they have the powder form that's more pure. People are now doing that with marijuana, and that's the BHO labs. They are increasing their THC content by doing virtually the exact same process, usually under pressure, and extracting the THC from the leaves, so it's no longer a plant product, it's a plant byproduct with an extremely high THC level, anywhere from 75 to 90%.
From your, and I know you've got lots of experience with this, do we have a problem in this county with our youth and marijuana use?
I would say anytime you have youth using a drug that's going to affect them negatively, whether it be alcohol, marijuana, methamphetamine, or prescription medication, cocaine, heroin, anytime you have a youth using it, then you have a problem. I wouldn't say that Pickens County has a greater problem than any other location. If anything, I would say that we probably, per capita, I would say we have less abusers of marijuana than many other regions and areas. Not to say we don't have people use it, not to say we don't have youth that use it on a recreational basis, But as far as what we see in our line of work as youth abusing it, I would say our numbers are lower than most areas.
Why? Why do you think that is?
It's a combination of things. It's a cultural thing. It's people in this area grow up more rural. There's less influence through the urban lifestyle. There's less influence from just having a lower population. Not to say that Pickens County doesn't have its own issues, because with those same statistics, we run into another issue with methamphetamine.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We definitely, in my opinion, have a methamphetamine issue, and I say that because that's what majority of my time as a narcotics unit investigator is most of my time in investigations is spent with methamphetamine, and that I would chalk that up to that's per capita, that's our biggest drug problem.
How accessible is marijuana in Pickens County, and is it as accessible for youth as it is for adults?
Well, it's kind of a unique animal here. With most older adults, it's as accessible as they have contacts. Most people are unaware that there's a thing called the dark web, and most youth, I would venture to say any youth watching this know exactly what the dark web is, and there's many adults that don't even realize it's out there, because we shop on it on a regular basis to see what's going on. But the dark web is basically the internet that you can only, it's a section of the internet you can only access if you have certain permissions, an anonymizer. You have to be hidden well enough because there's illicit things that are being sold on a regular basis. I could, if I had my computer and everything, I could actually log onto it and show you. I can purchase marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, ecstasy. I can order Molly, which is basically the same thing.
Okay, continue.
All right, we're back. Technical difficulties. It's because I mentioned the dark web. Somebody got upset about it.
Problem.
Don't tell people that.
Don't tell me
exists.
about that.
But yeah, and you can actually, there's firearms that can be purchased there, ammunition, explosives. I mean, there's an array of objects that.
And you can and those purchases are from across the world.
Across the world,
Not
yeah.
just Pickens County. Across the
no,
world.
and
Okay.
when I use an anonymizer, what happens when I log onto the internet? What it does is it bounces my IP address, which is your internet, your ISP, your internet service provider. Every location has a number that's represented for that location, and when I log in, what it does is it tricks that system and it bounces my address around. So every 15 seconds, it tells the internet I'm in a different place of the world. It'll tell that I'm in Germany, South America, Asia, Africa, maybe somewhere in North America, Canada, you know. And then it just consistently bounces me around. And that's software that you have to have before you can access the sites that are on the dark web, because they have their own regulation set up where you can't access it if you're in a known location, because then that would give law enforcement the opportunity to start to identify them or identify you. So you can access it that way. Like I said, you can purchase an array of things, and rarely is actual U.S. currency spent. You usually use bitcoins or some sort of internet currency, which changes in value from year to year. When the Bitcoin first started, you could get 1 unit for $1. Well, now you can't do that. 1 unit may cost $15. So it's almost like buying stock. If at the beginning you bought 1,000 units and they were worth $1, you spent $1,000. Well, now when they're worth $10 each, you now have a $10,000 product, or currency. But thing is, it's not like you can just cash it out for normal currency. You can spend it there,
Can you
or
talk,
sell it to somebody.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship? When you see on the news that a crime has been committed in this county, and you see reports of crimes from the sheriff's department through Facebook, and I'm always seeing comments about this person. They're a meth user
Involved in some sort of illicit drug.
Okay, so
how
much crime is marijuana related?
So what's the correlation between different illicit drugs with crimes?
Well, and specifically marijuana. Yeah.
I would say marijuana's on the lower side.
Okay.
Generally, it has a lot to do with the type of effects that marijuana has on an individual. Majority of the time, if we have a crime that's marijuana related, it's going to sound funny, but generally it's a violent crime like a home invasion. And this goes back to, once again, on the pro side of marijuana, people say it's not a violent drug, it doesn't make you do violent things, which inherently is true. Majority of people that, when they use marijuana and they get their euphoria through THC, they generally are not a violent person. They don't usually think well. They're generally, without, I'm trying not to dive into using too much slang, but they're usually lazy, stagnant. Maybe everybody jokes about they get the munchies, they want to eat. So on average, they're not a violent person. However, marijuana in itself invites other individuals who are naturally a violent person who may desire to have whatever that person has. And an example, I don't want to be too detailed, but we were working a case at one point in time where we were buying marijuana from a distributor within the county, and he was selling mediocre quantities of high-grade marijuana, and he was selling to some unsavory individuals who decided they wanted to come back and they wanted to rob him for his money because they knew he had money because he was charging top dollar for his illegal substance. They also wanted to steal the drugs that he had. So whenever they showed up at his house armed to take these things, he wasn't there. In the process of trying to take all of these items, they actually murdered a roommate of his and fled. Well, shortly thereafter, the dealer returns to, I'm sorry, he was there. He heard them come in. He climbed out of a window to hide. Shortly thereafter, he came back, and instead of rendering aid or trying to call 911, he was more focused on getting rid of all of his marijuana and all his paraphernalia and things of that nature, while a good friend of his was passing. And so it's an ugly situation, and legalization will not make that go away. It's been proven in places that it is legal. There's always the black market. Alcohol has been legal since Prohibition was dissolved, and we still to this day have a black market for alcohol. It still exists. There are still people who make their own alcohol. There are still people who sell homemade alcohol through the black market, because when the government wants to tax something, there's always people who do not want to pay the tax. So there will always be a black market. And a black market always has the propensity for violence. Even with alcohol, an individual who does not want to pay the tax is going to protect his product and his profits. In the same way that if marijuana is made completely legal and the government sells it like they do cigarettes in a pack and tax it, there will be somebody out there who will want to sell it on the black market because they see an opportunity to make money tax-free.
There you go. Okay, and let's talk about illicit drugs. And you were talking, what was that website? On the internet, what did you call it?
Oh, where you can, it's called the dark web. There's a numerous one. Most people that are familiar with what used to operate as the Silk Road, and that was the name of one site where you could go on there, and if there's a drug in existence, you could buy it on there.
Because the next question is, how easily available are illicit drugs? And that's kind of a crazy question for me and you, because we've been in this field for a very long time, but that's not a simple question for probably some of the folks watching this.
It's kind of one of those things is I like to say, if you've got money in your pocket and you want it, you can find it. It's just how willing are you to search for it. Dark web, like I said, you can get on there, you can order it, it'll come straight to your house. Now, there's fair warning to those of you listening, there's no guarantee that when it comes through the mail that it's not going to be one of us delivering it to you. We do that on a regular basis. So there is a certain amount of risk that's taken there, because us and other agencies do parcel interdictions, and that's where we intercept mail and we'll deliver it, and then the next knock on your door is us coming in with a search warrant. But that obviously is one avenue. But if a person is really seeking an illicit drug, even here in Pickens County, it would not be impossible to find. But if you're not connected somehow, if you don't have a friend of a friend or family of a friend or some sort of connection to someone in that arena, then it's going to be a little more difficult because they're not going to trust you. They're going to think that you're me, coming in trying to do what we call a cold contact. You know, making a purchase of an illicit drug on a first meet basis.
So let's see how I can ask this question. How accessible are illicit drugs to the youth in this county? Because you talked some about adults, but how accessible? I know that with youth,
well,
a lot of times they get the drugs from their parents'
that's true.
medicine cabinets, but beyond that,
we have actually had issues where, and I'm going to go into a little bit of the realm of methamphetamine. Like I said, that occupies the majority of my time as a drug investigator in Pickens County. We have had issues where parents have allowed their kids, young high school, late middle school age, to use methamphetamine. And one of the biggest reasons they do it, and this is coming from that child after they have grown up and have been in trouble with the law, and we've sat down and interviewed them. The purpose for the parent to give them that was because they were worried that the child was going to call law enforcement or get law enforcement involved and discover their illicit drug use. Methamphetamine is a very sad situation. What it does to people, how it changes their life, how it makes them a shell of the person they used to be. Anybody that has a family member that has abused methamphetamine could come in here and sit there and tell you that my family member was one person. When they started using meth, they became the exact opposite. They generally they'll steal. You asked about the correlation of crime and drug use, and like I said, with marijuana, we generally don't have as much property crime. It's generally the.
Keep going. I'm gonna move this up a little bit.
You're fine.
So I can get up here and sit down.
It's generally crimes as far as back to the black market. Somebody wanting to take what somebody else has. But when it comes to methamphetamine, the methamphetamine users, generally they have drained their life of their own sustenance, their own ability to take care of themselves, and with that goes their ability to buy or supply their own need. And we have on multiple occasions had individuals who are stealing from their own parents, their brothers or sisters, their cousins. They'll steal from their family because when it comes to their desire to get their methamphetamine, nothing surpasses that. There's no bridge they won't burn to fuel their need for methamphetamine, and that's just a testament to its strong addictive nature. I tell people that if you went into the Pickens County Sheriff's Office, and we have the database that you can, every single person that's ever booked in's name, date of birth, that charges, everything are listed. I tell people if you went in there and you were able to remove methamphetamine crimes, and that's if they were in possession of methamphetamine, they were attempting to possess methamphetamine, if it's a property crime, were they stealing it to get methamphetamine, to trade for methamphetamine, were they on methamphetamine? If you anybody that's associated with methamphetamine in the Pickens County Detention Facility over there, if you were able to remove methamphetamine from the equation and it's completely gone, my guesstimation, and this is I haven't crunched the numbers, this is by no means any kind of research, this is just through, when I get to the office in the morning, I look, see who's in jail. Do I know them? Are they involved in meth? Are they a associate of someone involved in meth? Because if they are, I might need to go talk to them. When I look through that, my guesstimation would be 80% of those crimes wouldn't exist if you completely removed methamphetamine from the equation. If you removed all illicit drugs, every illegal drug, I would guesstimate you could probably remove upwards to 90 to 95%. If you removed all alcohol involved, we would probably be sitting with about 10 people in jail on a regular basis. And
that would be nice, wouldn't it?
that would be wonderful. It would feel like we were in Mayberry.
To what extent are people in the county using crack cocaine, and heroin? Because you talked about meth,
Yeah.
and you talked about, I mean, we know that meth is a problem. We know that
Yep.
that prescription drugs are a problem. We know marijuana is a problem. We know alcohol's a problem.
Well, the prescription drugs and your heroin are going to correlate, and that's because the majority of the prescription drugs that we see abused are some sort of synthetic opioid, meaning that they've been created in a lab, but when they were created to mimic the chemical structure of an opioid, a pain medication or something that's made in the same fashion.
Hold that thought for just a minute.
All right.
Can you do that? I've seen that. I can see that Angie Farmer has joined. And Angie is the Deputy Director of Behavioral Health. And Angie, we thank you for allowing us to have this live broadcast today. Okay, go ahead.
All right. And because their chemical structure is so similar, what we see is, obviously, because they are possessed legally, prescription medication is just a little bit easier to ascertain. I mean, when we do drug talks, I've stood in front of groups of youth, and I have them raise their hand and hold their hand up. I say, raise your hand if you've ever had a prescription. 90% or more of the kids raise their hand. How many of you have ever had a family member in your household with a prescription? It gets to the point where how many of you have a family member whose home you can access has had a prescription? Rarely do you have, at that point in time, anybody that doesn't have their hand up. And it shows that they're easily accessible because they're in the cabinet. And if you want it, it's there to get. And their chemical structure is so similar, they have a similar physiological and psychological effect as opioids do. So what we have seen happen is individuals will start to abuse that medication, whether it be theirs or not. And once they become addicted to it, they have that psychological and physiological addiction that their body doesn't operate under homeostasis unless that drug is in their system. It starts to cost a lot of money. And eventually the cost of keeping that habit up surpasses what it would cost them to actually buy heroin. And at that point in time, they move over to the black market and they start purchasing heroin. And going back on that, and I'm going to touch on the marijuana thing while we're on heroin, because heroin there for the longest time, like I said, I've worked in narcotics unit in Pickens County from 2007 to current day, and for the first several years, we had no complaints on heroin dealers. We had no information on heroin dealers, and until recently, heroin was a non-factor for us. It was almost like I wouldn't say it didn't exist, but as far as for us, it was almost like it wasn't in Pickens County. Now, I'm not ignorant enough to say it didn't exist and it wasn't here, but it was just on such a low level that it was under our radar. It's not that way anymore. It's on its way up, and we attest a lot of it to prescription medication abuse. But in my captain's over 20 years of work in investigations in narcotics, he has done thousands and thousands and thousands of interviews. Anytime somebody comes booked in our jail with drug charges that we talk to, we sit down and what we try to do is formulate an investigation, because our objective is not to arrest and incarcerate people that are addicts. We want them to get help. We want them to get away from the drug and move forward. What our objective is to find out who's poisoning our communities, who's selling to these people, because they're benefiting off an addiction. They're benefiting off of a sickness that a person has. And that sickness is only made worse through their benefit. So we talk to them, we try to start cases or generate cases where we can work up to the individual who's really poisoned our community, and that's the one that we want to put in prison. Well, through those investigations, we always ask people, what is the first illegal drug you ever used? And through my captain's 20-something odd years in narcotics, he has had 0 people tell him that their first illicit drug they used was anything other than marijuana. 100%, every single one of them has said marijuana. And it goes back, you know, to the gateway drug argument, is know that just because somebody uses marijuana, that doesn't mean they're going to be a lifetime drug addict. It doesn't mean they're going to be a heroin addict. It doesn't mean they're going to be a methamphetamine addict. But it does mean that if they either are a methamphetamine or heroin addict, there's a good chance it's because they tried marijuana. So we tell people, why even start? Why even try? Why even take that first step down the path that you don't want to follow? I've been working at the Special Operations Unit, the Narcotics Unit, for right at 10 years now, and I have done the same thing through my interrogations, or not really interrogations, because that's not what they are. They're really more just an interview of asking people, hey, what's the first drug you've ever used? Illegal drug. And up until the past 2 or 3 years, it has been 100% marijuana. Just recently, out of 10 years of talking to hundreds of people a year, I've had 2 tell me otherwise. And both of them were not drug users. They had never been a drug user until they were addicted to heroin. And I said, well, how did you get, heroin was the first illegal drug I ever used. I said, well, how did you get hooked on heroin? I had a surgery, and both of them. I had a surgery. I was prescribed hydrocodones. I took them as prescribed. Every 4 hours, I was taking my Lortab, acetaminophen pill. I got to the point where I felt like I hurt all the time if I didn't have it, so I started taking them more regular. When I stopped taking them, I hurt all the time. I had to have them. Eventually, when I took them, I would hurt, so I moved up to roxycodones. Once I got to feeling like that, I had a friend introduce me to a heroin dealer. Mm-hmm. So theirs went directly from a doctor-prescribed medication to addicted to heroin. Mm-hmm. Those are the only 2 people that I've had that did not start with marijuana. So it's not a cause and effect, but there's a definite correlation of marijuana to hard drugs. I'm not going to say that it's cause and effect, that marijuana is 100% going to lead you into hard drugs, but I will say there's definitely a correlation that it can. So why even take the chance?
That's right. What are some ways that parents, guardians, teachers, what are some things that they could look for to just if they thought that their child or the young person was using?
Well, the first thing I do, and I know that when adolescents go into their teen years, there's going to be a change, because there's hormonally, your body's changing, so it causes attitude changes. But with those changes that are happening set aside, look for 180s. Look for kids suddenly being, who were outgoing, suddenly being really reclusive. Look for who their friends are. Pay attention to who they're hanging out with and what they're wanting to do with their friends. Be vigilant in paying attention to where they're going, what they're doing. The biggest thing is, don't be complacent, and I've had this happen with myself, with people that I know, is think, oh, well, they would never do that. You see the signs, you see the symptoms, you notice a change in their life. Something as easy as you notice that strange aroma on them. You're like, oh, well, they were here. They must have just picked it up. It couldn't be them. Don't let that go on unnoticed, or treat it like it didn't happen. Be vigilant about it. Go ahead, and because the worst thing that can happen is, if they're not using an illicit drug, you might hurt their feelings. But I would rather hurt my child's feelings 1,000 times than to know that I let it go and didn't pay attention to it. And hindsight's always 20/20, and look back at my child who is an addict and say, I saw the warning signs.
And I just thought, not my child.
Not my child.
Yeah.
Because it can be anybody's child.
That's exactly right. We got Miss Angie Bragg has asked a couple of questions on here, so
right.
Let's. In your opinion, what steps are being made and or need to be made to reduce the methamphetamine and opiate problem in Pickens County?
Well, the steps that I've seen being made and that I'd like to see continued is teaching people at a young enough age. and we talk about that when we do our drug talks, because we've done them at the high school, and I've done a couple. We've done a couple at middle school, and there's a huge difference in the receptiveness of the information. Once we get, and it may be just my personal opinion, but this is the way it feels when I talk to a junior or a senior in high school. I feel like they have already made their mind up. They've already decided, I'm not going to listen to you. I know what's best for me. Or they have already decided, I don't need to hear this. I'm not going to use drugs. I'm already on that side of the fence.
Because they're at that age where they kind of know everything.
They know everything. I remember that. I knew everything. Mm-hmm. I still feel like I knew everything. You know, I'm amazed at how much smarter my parents were than I realized. But no, it's you have to find that right point where you don't want to tell them too young about stuff, because you don't want to create that desire to find out. You know, you make them more interested in it, because you introduce them into a new idea that they've never heard of before. You got to find the balance between that and perking their interest in it. You know, soon enough that you don't perk their interest. It's something that they need to know about, but not so late that they've already made up their mind. Mm-hmm. You know, we've done drug talks, like I said, juniors and seniors in high school. Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to a brick wall, because, like I said, they're already on one side or the other. You know, majority of the time, the receptiveness that I get is somebody that's interested in law enforcement and they've got questions, or somebody that knows somebody that's on drugs and they want to give me the information. Other than that, you get the, I'm not using drugs, I don't need to listen to you, or I'm going to do drugs and I'm not going to listen to you.
So education, you feel like is the key.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Oh, absolutely. It's my biggest thing, and especially with methamphetamine, is to show people what is going to happen, because it's not a what might happen to an individual who uses methamphetamine. It's what's going to happen. You can walk through Bilo, Ingalls, the Hot Spot, McDonald's, and you can tell who has been using methamphetamine. Mm-hmm. Because the physiological, the psychological effects are telltale. It is impossible to hide that addiction. It just doesn't happen. The way people hide it is their family members do exactly what I said earlier. They see what has happened, and they say, not my family member. Mm-hmm.
All right, Angie's got another question.
All right.
Are you seeing an increase in cannabis oils in Pickens County?
Across the county, not so much. We have seen an increase down towards the central area, but it fluctuates. And what most of that is you'll have people that try to take advantage of the college-age students, and that's our largest little group of people that are that age. So that's generally where it influxes during the school years. They're trying to take advantage of the college-age kids, and a lot of times it's generally somebody that's moved in from the area, just pretty much to set up shop and to take advantage of it to make money. But we have not seen a huge increase, like I said, countywide. That's definitely going to be where most of our psychedelics and our the BHO is.
What does BHO stand for? Did you say that already?
Butyroconazole.
Okay.
I didn't explain what it was, but yeah.
Okay.
It's basically a combination of one of the solvents that they use, and they call it honey oil because the consistency of it, whenever it's in a semi-liquid state, very similar. The consistency is very similar. The color is very similar to honey.
All right. Let's see. We've got about 10 more minutes, and there are a couple of questions I want to be sure that we hit.
All right.
Talk about legal consequences for a youth, for a juvenile using marijuana. What are the legal consequences?
Well, right now, and this is kind of it's a bit of a sore subject with some law enforcement, and it's why you'll have, even in law enforcement, you have people on both sides of the legality issue. Because it's been decriminalized so much that the penalties for marijuana are severely reduced in correlation or in comparison to other drugs, yet it's still illegal, so people still protect it with the same veracity as they would any other drug. An example would be, and I'll answer your question short. I know it doesn't really answer it, but I'm kind of leading into it, is an individual who is a marijuana dealer still has a product and he still has money and it's still illegal for him to possess. So it can still be taken from him. Just like a methamphetamine user has a product and has money and can be taken from him because it's illegal. These two men are going to protect, or I say men, women, persons, are going to protect that with the same veracity. You know, neither one of them want to lose what they have. So as a law enforcement officer, whether I'm working the marijuana or the methamphetamine side, I'm taking the same risk to get that off of the street with both sides. Mm-hmm. But with one of them, that risk doesn't have any reward or has very small reward. Whereas if I go the other direction, there's a lot heavier consequence for that person. Marijuana is, if you are just in possession of it, it's a misdemeanor. It can actually be written on a blue ticket, and you can be sent on your way. It is an arrestable offense. You can be arrested, but it carries a misdemeanor offense. Off the top of my head, I don't really. This is a terrible confession. The last ticket I wrote was like 2013. So I do mostly warrants. I work mostly in felonies, but I want to say it has to be under $1,000. I want to say off the top of my head the fine's $494 and some change, or no more than 30 days in jail. And then of course the thing about drug offenses that most young people don't realize is they get put on your record, they stay on your record, and they're all graduating offenses. So the next time you get caught, that becomes, even just with marijuana, it's possession other than first offense. Mm-hmm. And if you ever move into the realm of other drugs, those stay on your record, and each time you get caught, you look at more time in jail. You can end up, even with just a possession of methamphetamine, facing 10 years in prison, possessing less than a gram. It's just you've been caught so many times with it, it's a graduating offense. So the other things go with it. Your license gets suspended, so you're going to lose your driving privileges. And if you're somebody that wants to go from point A to point B and you want to get yourself there, if you get caught driving under suspension, you're looking at more jail time and you're looking at more fines. And that too is a graduating offense. After you get caught too many times, you'll be labeled a habitual offender. At that point in time, it's mandatory jail time. You don't get to pay a fine and get out of it. You have to go sit in a prison cell.
I want to ask you, and this is not in this list of questions, but how many, and I don't know that I'm really looking for a number, but how common is it for you to arrest a juvenile for possession of marijuana?
It's not to actually arrest them or to, mm-hmm. in law, for me to stop you and to write you a ticket is technically an arrest, according to the Fourth Amendment, because I have taken your freedom, you're not free mm-hmm. to leave, and I'm writing you this summons, and then I'm setting you free. It's technically an arrest, but it's not a custodial arrest. Right. But as far as, it's rare. I mean, every once in a while we'll catch somebody, like when we work the prom details, because alcohol falls under the Special Operations Unit. So in the prom season, we go out, we go with our community action team, and we try to do road checks to make sure we don't have people driving under the influence. And then any reports we get of large group gatherings, we'll go in there and we'll check and make sure everybody's good, nobody's consuming alcohol underage, and things of those nature. But and every once in a while we'll run into the situation. We'll have a youth has a little sack of marijuana or something on him. But as far as us running into them, it doesn't happen a whole lot. Now, our road units, that it may be more frequent for them because they're more interactive with the general public than we are. Usually, if I'm interacting with somebody, they're a drug dealer. Mm-hmm. Majority of the time, they've sold drugs to somebody, or they were in possession of enough amount that they're charged with possession with intent to distribute. So there's a good chance that they're a drug dealer. My experience through the years with adolescents has been that they get charged with something else, mm-hmm. and then when they're screened, marijuana becomes an issue. Becomes an issue. But it's not. That was not necessarily the reason. Their original charge. Yeah. Well, and it goes back to marijuana is an illegal drug, and it's not once again not to say that everybody that uses marijuana or that has used marijuana is going to be involved in other illegal things, but generally a person doesn't want to operate within the wrong side of the law just in one area. It rarely happens that way.
I was going to ask you something else, but let's do this last one.
I mean, we do stem a lot of marijuana charges that we make stem from. We do a controlled purchase of methamphetamine from a residence. We do a search warrant. They've got marijuana in their house. I mean, it's rare. It's a rarity that we do something that marijuana is the only illicit drug there. It's just not common.
All right, last question.
All right.
How can we as citizens help our community in getting rid of illicit drugs and marijuana?
Don't get caught up. It's funny. I actually have this debate with my wife on a time to time. Is what do we tell kids who tell on people that are doing something wrong, but it's not affecting them? Don't be a tattletale. And it's something that we've incorporated in deep into us, that it's wrong to tell on somebody who's doing something wrong as long as it's not affecting you. Well, what that does is it stays inside of us to adults, and we have had it happen. We've had people call the sheriff's office and say, I need to file a complaint about my neighbor, so being a drug dealer. So we'll take him and they'll say, well, this individual's been selling drugs for 5 years, and yesterday he stole my weed eater. I want y'all to get him for selling drugs. And I'll, sir, madam, why did you wait 5 years? You know that they've been poisoning our county for 5 years. Well, it didn't affect me. What they don't realize is that affects somebody else. And that's the thing is don't get that caught up in your mindset. I know this person's doing wrong, but it's not affecting me, because it is. Because if you're a parent, one day somebody's going to offer drugs to your child. You know, one day it's going to make full circle, and it will affect you, whether they're still in your weed eater. You know, so be vigilant about that. Don't think twice. I mean, it can be anonymous. We're not going to, you know, if you were to call me Faye and say, hey, my next door neighbor's selling meth, I'm not going to go knock on his door and say, hey, Faye Nichols told me you're selling dope. Where's the dope? I would never do that. Never. I would never endanger a citizen. As a matter of fact, the people that work with us that we call confidential informants, we protect them like they're one of us, because it does me no good to endanger people to get my job across. You know, I want to eliminate drug use. Obviously, that's never going to happen. But it's what I've told people is, if I can prevent one person from becoming a meth addict, then the 25 years that I'll spend in law enforcement before I retire is 25 years well spent. If I can fix one life, it's 25 years well spent.
Or if that person in the throes of their meth addiction, if you can do something to help them realize they need to stop.
Absolutely.
Then that it makes,
yeah. Absolutely.
Because, you know, I've been in this field 31 years, and I hope that through the years I have prevented somebody, or not me, but what I have done has prevented somebody from using, or that what I have done has made them stop and think about what they were doing.
Yeah, think about that. That's not the way life's supposed to be.
That's right.
It's not supposed to be a revolving door, a circle of chasing the dragon, of consistently worrying about where's my next high, because that's what methamphetamine is. It's a day in, day out of where's my next high. And that's not me talking. That's me sitting down to multiple drug addicted individuals who say, this is what my day's like. I wake up and I'm not worried about what I'm going to do today, where I'm going to work, what I'm going to eat, where my family is. He said, the first thing I think about is, where am I going to get my high today?
You know, Tommy, I remember one time I seen somebody, they were smoking pot and they were drinking too, and the comment to me was, why do you care? Why do you care what I'm doing? And I said, I care because you don't live next to me, you don't live in my neighborhood, you don't associate with my family, but you're on that road.
Exactly.
And you're driving. And I have children. And at this point, now in my life, I can say I've got grandchildren.
Yep.
And you're putting my family at risk when you're driving that car. Now, that's not all of it. That's not the total reason.
No.
I care because I want them, as a human being, I want them to, this person I'm talking to lead a full, productive life.
Well,
but it does, you know,
right.
I just remember, for me, it would go back to, but you're out there driving, and my kids are driving, and I don't want you to kill one of them.
Well, and that goes back to answer your question about what the public can do is don't be afraid to contact law enforcement, because we're only as good as the public will let us be. Without the public, we can't do our job. Our investigators can't solve property crimes. We can't stop the drug dealing. We can't do it without the public. We are nothing more than an extension of their arm to try to combat the illegal things that take place. People call drugs a victimless crime, and that's 100% wrong. I've heard that so many times. Drug offenses are not victimless. What it is everybody is a victim of a drug offense.
Right. Everybody in the community is
everybody is a victim of a drug offense. So that's why, to answer your question, what can people do? Call us. Let us know. Keep us informed. You know, a lot of times you may feel like you're bothering us, or your information is never negative. It never hurts us to know as much as we can, because eventually we'll need that information. It might not help us right this second, but it may help us in the future. And to remember that, don't get that I don't want to be a tattletale mentality, because it does affect you. It might not affect you right now. It might not affect you in 3 years. But at some point in time, drug use, drug distribution, drug abuse will come full circle, and somehow it will affect you. So don't give it that opportunity.
All right. Officer Blankenship, Agent Blankenship, we are at the end of our hour. On behalf of the Stepping Up Coalition of Pickens County, we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Special thanks to Agent Blankenship for taking the time out of his day to sit and speak with us. Y'all have a good day.